Hello guys, welcome back to my video podcast Career Change, Heal to Lead. My name is Stephanie Grenke and I'm a career coach and expert for building a fulfilling and successful career. Thank you for listening again. In this episode, I will talk to you about your boss and what you really think of him or her. Because this might sound a bit strange in the beginning, but really what we think of our bosses has a lot to do with us and how our career progresses. So if there might be parts of your career where you're not quite sure how it's going and you're maybe not going quite where you had hoped you would be going with your career, this is going to be a really, really important episode for you. For me, it was a game changer when I started really looking at my belief system around bosses and leaders and really started being honest to myself on what I was thinking, because this changed a lot in how I was feeling about my career, but it also had impact on salary raises I got and in general how my career progressed and the kind of doors that opened to me. So if you felt a bit stuck with any part of your career, it's definitely worth listening to this and go with the uncomfortable parts, because as most of you know that do things with personal development, this is where the real growth lies. So stick with me with this exciting episode, and let's get started. Have a lot of fun. Here comes a truth bomb right at the beginning. Most of us have negative opinions about our bosses and leaders, even if we're already a boss or leader ourselves. And this is where it's going to get interesting today. Now, you might say, no, Stephanie. I'm all positive. I think bosses and leaders are great. I'm a great leader. But if you're a little bit too sure about it, or if you're already sure about it, why not listen to this anyways and see if any of the questions could still give you a little hint of what you could improve even further. So maybe you can start in this episode by asking yourself these questions. First, have you ever thought you knew better than your boss and then acted upon your opinion rather than on theirs? Do you find yourself struggling to get pay rises or get overlooked at promotions? Does work sometimes feel like a fight to you and you feel like you need to watch your back and make sure you're not taken advantage of? And then, have you ever been trying to move into a leadership position, but somehow it hasn't worked out the way you wanted? And then last one is, are you maybe a leader right now, but you constantly worry about your team not performing or not respecting you, and maybe you're not even sure you want to be a boss? So if you just said yes to any of those, or if that's just the nuance of any of those questions where you're like, maybe yes, that I've had these kind of situations. I'm not saying it's all a problem and you need to change everything, but there might be a hint that maybe on a subconscious level, there is a belief system that isn't actually helping you with your career. And I'll share with you my top three kind of like limiting beliefs around bosses that I find a lot when working with my clients, but especially that I found working on myself and the kind of career I've had in the past. And of course, later on, I'm going to be curious to hear from you guys if you could relate, if any of this sounds familiar to you, and maybe how you have managed to change some of those beliefs for you. But yeah, I'll give you those top three beliefs right now, and let's see if any of those resonate. So the first one that I was really, really big on from the beginning is I know better than my bosses, and they just want to keep me small because they're afraid of me. Um, this isn't an easy episode for me because I've not ever admitted that to such a public forum, but this was kind of my opinion that a lot of the times I kind of thought I knew better, and this is what I used as an excuse to then act on things that I thought were better. And this really was a revelation for me when I started getting into coaching and I was complaining about, one of my old jobs. And I said, well, I don't like bosses. They keep me small. This one year I was really helping out on pushing a big project forward. And I didn't get my full bonus payment. I had to like fight for it. I would never get the vacations that I wanted. I didn't get a promotion. They didn't give me a very good evaluation at the end of the year. And my coach then said to me and said, well, why have they given you a lower bonus? And the part that I kind of like had erased from my mind was, well, they had given me a different task on which they measured me on getting the bonus. And I single-handedly had decided that this didn't make a lot of sense for the team, that I'd rather help out on a different, bigger project to move that forward because I thought that would be better for the team. And I neglected my own, right? So in a way, I was undermining the authority and thought I knew better. and didn't even get the idea to discuss it with my boss because I thought, well, I know so much better, I'm smarter, I don't need to discuss it with anyone, this is clear. And basically they just pulled the kind of like possibilities they had and saying, you know what, this wasn't the agreement, right? They didn't even say you did something wrong and it wasn't helpful to the team, but this is not how a team works. And this is when I realized, well, you have a boss not necessarily always because they're better people with everything, and they don't need to be better people with everything. That's not the point, but there is a structure to keep you organized and to keep a team focused on achieving certain results. And for that, if you're part of the team, you also need to trust that your leader is basically orchestrating this in a way so that the overall picture for the team makes sense. So if you're the one kind of single-handedly deciding that you know better and doing something else, you're not only undermining your boss, you're undermining the success of the entire team. So that really sat with me really heavily, and I had to think about it for a very long time. But I think slowly I started getting over it, forgiving myself. I really gave myself a really hard talk on this. And I realized, well, I can bring up my opinion because a boss doesn't need to know everything. I think before I thought that bosses need to know everything, and if they don't, I can't respect them, but that's actual complete bullshit. But if you have different ideas, you need to come up with your go to your boss, discuss it, and then basically have a respectful relationship with this. And that really, really was a game changer for me. So the second big belief that I see a lot in clients when they come to me, especially if they're like about to move into a leadership position or they kind of want to, is saying like, well, bosses are either lazy, greedy, or let others do all the work for them. So they kind of feel like, oh, I'm being exploited, I'm not getting enough, I need to fight back, I need to watch my back. And this is when I realized this. I had this for a very long time, but a lot of the times we hold this belief when we think that bosses need to do the same work as we do, but they have a completely different job, right? So bosses are there to hold the frame. So they need to like set goals, they need to steer a team. For them, talking to their employees and helping them resolve blockages is exactly the kind of work that they're supposed to do. And that's not your job. Your job is to basically then, as a team member, fill the frame and basically execute on certain things. And so you can't actually set the same standard for bosses and for team members because it's very different jobs. If your boss is trying to try and do the same job as you are doing, it's not actually going to be helpful to anybody because nobody's going to coordinate. Um, so when I realized that, and that's usually what I tell my clients, I'm like, is that really the case? Is your boss really greedy, lazy, and does other lets others do the work for them? A lot of the time, I've never found something where that is like actually true. But it's usually a different type of like relationship that they've built and different requirements that we think we pose to our bosses, but that actually isn't true. So maybe think about this next time you have this thought. And I'm not saying that there isn't black sheep out there and that there might be bosses who are exploiting their employees. But then remember, and this is what I tell people as well, it is your responsibility. So responsibility is your ability to respond. If you realize that that is the case, there is nobody keeping you from sticking around. It's your ability to respond. You can respond to the situation and you can decide to stay or you can decide to leave. But still, holding this general negative opinion about bosses is not going to help you. I had a client a while ago and she made some bad experiences with bosses in her first job. And then basically she said, well, that's how bosses are. They're greedy, they're lazy, they let other people work for them. And then when she moved into a new company that had a completely different management philosophy, she still held on to that belief because it was so subconscious she didn't realize. For her, it was the truth. It was like, this is how people work, this is how bosses work. And when that happened to her, she couldn't move into new leadership position. Every time she had a boss, she was kind of not sure. She wasn't sure she could trust them. She didn't trust herself in being a good leader because obviously she didn't want to become like her old bosses, but in her mind, that was the only way to be a boss. So it's always worth asking yourself about these kind of things because if you make one bad experience, it doesn't mean that it's going to be like that everywhere. And you can always choose, right? You always have the ability to respond, and you can respond by staying, and you can respond by leaving, or you can respond by having a conversation and trying to push change. So you have a lot of abilities in order to try and change the situation if that what you're doing is not something you like, right? So this was the second one. The third one that a lot of people hold, and that's why their career isn't moving forward, or they're not getting the pay rise, or they're not interacting with their boss the way they want to, is that they think being a leader is exhausting. It can only be achieved by putting pressure on others and constantly watching your back and putting pressure on yourself. So this sounds to me like a very, very exhausting job, right? Who wants to do that if they feel like, if I'm moving into such a responsibility, I'm going to be under constant stress, constant pressure. I need to put constant pressure on others because that's the only way you can grow. That's the only way you can improve. That's the only way you can survive in the end. That's usually what's behind it. Then it gets exhausting and you don't want to be a leader. So you can maybe check if that's what you're believing and what experiences you have made that made you think that it's exhausting and then there's no other way of doing this. I've made a lot of experiences that actually with myself when I first started out my career, with former bosses I've had, was that they're under constant stress. So even if there wasn't a lot going on, and I sometimes even like to say, even the Chancellor of Germany probably doesn't have 100% of their activities that are like life and death dependent, right? Even they have some activities that if they drop them for a day, nothing bad is going to happen. But sometimes we in industry and companies think that if one thing drops, everything is going to fall apart. And I think that is like this kind of hustle mode is not really helping us. It's not helping us with like being healthy, keeping our vitality, staying in a good mood, and also being able to be creative, creating something new. Because if you're under constant pressure, you're sometimes also just grasping tasks. But do they really move the needle is a very different question. But that's also maybe a topic for a different episode. Anyway, so if you're thinking life needs to be stressful, it's going to be likely for you as a leader that you will keep drawing tasks, that you might be even going to micromanage, that you're not going to delegate to a lot of people, or that you try and delegate with a lot of pressure because that's the way you deal with yourself and that you've known to like lead yourself. And obviously, then it's not going to be very attractive, especially if your subconscious already knows that. And maybe you've started struggling with, high blood pressure, your body's kind of reacting, you can't calm down on the weekends, you're binge watching series because that's the only way you can relax. These are all kind of signs that you might have a negative belief system around the work ethic and maybe the work ethic as a leader. And this could be worth questioning because I've worked with people that when they start working with me, they're like, all of a sudden, I get more done and I'm more relaxed. And I even picked up my hobbies again. So doing a lot doesn't equal achieving a lot. And that is very important in order to change that belief system, that you start realizing doing a lot equals not, doesn't equal achieving a lot. So these are like the top three that I have found in terms of limiting beliefs that you can have around bosses, that you know better and they want to keep you small, that bosses are lazy and let other people work for them, and that being a leader is exhausting and you need to put a lot of pressure on yourself and others. When I had these kind of like beliefs, like I said before, um, I got lower bonus payments because I was basically undermining my boss. Everything felt like a competition to me. I was close to burnout. I had all of these things that weren't really serving me. And the way I changed these beliefs is in three ways again. So the thing that I realized is bosses and employees, like I said before, are two different roles, which require very different ways of acting to be successful, right? So bosses hold the frame and employees fill the frame. So you can't actually do the same thing, and you shouldn't be judging as one is better than the other. Both of you need each other, but depending on the position that you're in, you get to do different things. So that's basically how you can switch it in terms of like, I know better. If you're the one filling the frame, doesn't mean that out of your expertise, you can tell your boss and say, can we make these adjustments? But it's still the boss's task to then decide on the readjustment of the frame. But you can always make suggestions. So I'm not saying if you're the one filling the frame, you don't get to have an opinion and don't get to say anything. That's not what I'm saying. All right, so this is the first one. The second one, in terms of bosses are lazy versus the new one I replaced it with, is my bosses want to see me grow and I contribute my strengths and capabilities, because a good boss does not need to know everything, right? So laziness, I let go, because sometimes what bosses really need to do is just hold the frame. So they don't need to be super active and hustling all the time, because then they don't get to observe the system and see which adjustments they need to make. They don't get to talk to people. I have multiple clients that come to me and say, well, I'm so busy with projects and execution myself. I have no time to lead my people. I have no time to talk to people. And I think that's a huge problem, because for me, great leadership comes from holding that frame, from trying to dissolve blockages with people, from talking to your team. And so I said, well, all my bosses want to see me grow and they're going to help hold the frame for me for that. And if I get to a point where I feel like this is what I've learned in this container, I move to the next container, right? Like for myself right now, I've started building my own business. So I want a new container now. That's completely fine. No hard feelings, right? But every boss, and since then, actually, I've only had bosses that really wanted to see me grow. And then the last part that I replaced with this was, being a leader is fun and people want to be productive in my team, so we can create a great momentum together. So I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but people want to be productive, people want to be creative. And if they are not, especially at work, that means at some point they've made an experience where their creativity and their productivity wasn't rewarded or didn't want to be seen. So you can always ask yourself, are they maybe creative and productive in other parts of their life, in their hobbies, in their family life, building a house, renovating, whatever that may be? And how can you spark that again in your team? And that's when it's really starting to become fun as a leader, because you also don't need to be the one that's doing everything, knowing everything, initiating everything, because people actually want to do things like that. And I can just tell you a little bit about the story. After I did all this dissolving of beliefs, the job I got afterwards was so different. The boss already said in my interviews, like, well, I'm really excited for you to join my team because I need someone who has an expertise in program management. I need someone who really knows all the details and like can give me suggestions and recommendations on how we best build the structure. So from the beginning, it was a very, very different setting. And he even gave me the support to do my coaching certification on the side, because I said, see, this is something I want to do for myself, but I would need a couple of days off every couple of weeks. And he was completely fine with this. So he wanted to see me grow, right, on all levels. And he knew he was going to get everything back. So he supported me with everything that I needed in order to really fill my role. And at some point, I even got a huge pay rise, the biggest pay rise I've ever gotten in my career, without particularly asking for it, because he just felt that this was also part of the frame that he wanted to give me to make sure I stayed performant and I was doing great things for the company. So this is, I think, when really being a boss and an employee and working together becomes a win-win situation. And this is really what it became to me. And I even started to get to the point where I'm like, I want a boss. I want someone to hold that space and that frame for me, because especially now that I'm an entrepreneur myself, I really know how to value that. I don't know if you've ever really appreciated your boss, or if your boss yourself appreciated yourself for how much you're holding the frame for other people. This is something great that you get to do, because um, you need that. Right now, as an entrepreneur, I work with mentors and coaches myself, because I've realized I want someone every once in a while to hold the frame for me, right? Because maybe they've achieved something with their businesses that I haven't, that I need to get to, that I want to learn about. And um, it's a good thing that people hold space for you, but they're not going to get into my business and be like, you do it like this, you have to do it like this, let me do it for you. And that's also not what I'm expecting. But I know that if I'm in their energy and if they're supporting me with things, that's basically the kind of frame that I need in order to up level myself to the next level. So Try and think about next time you have any conflicts at work, how can this be a win-win relationship? And how do I look at things so that right now it doesn't feel like a win-win relationship? Because I can assure you from my own experience, you can even get a pay rise without asking for it if you've dissolved your limiting beliefs. There's doors opening. When I left the company, they started making me offers to join a different company because some of them had moved on, some of my former bosses. And if I had not decided to start my own business, I would totally have gone for it. So you can actually have a great relationship, even if at some point you're starting to separate ways. And I think that's like a very important thing to say. So I can honestly say I love bosses now. I love being a boss. I love working for bosses. I love people that hold the frame for me. And I think this has enabled me myself to move into leadership positions. And that's the thing that you need in order to really be successful towards the things that you want to achieve. Because if you hold a negative opinion about something and you judge something, your brain automatically will keep you from moving there because you don't want to be judged yourself, right? Based on what you're making up in your own mind. So I also want to take this opportunity to thank all my former bosses. Maybe some of you will listen to this in the future. Thanks for putting up with me. I'm so sorry for undermining some of you. I hope you can forgive me. It's taken me some time to forgive myself after I realized all of these things. But I think in the end, we're all here to learn and grow from each other. So thank you for holding space for me to grow, for making mistakes, and for learning my lessons to be successful now and serve people. And I hope that all of you could take something away from this episode today, had some interesting insights. I know sometimes some of this can feel a bit uncomfortable, so greet it with kindness. Don't punch yourself for it. It's completely fine. We all have this. You didn't do anything wrong. But this is the way to really change big things for you and achieve things that you want and getting towards the kind of growth that you want in your career. Um, Please let me know in the comments if you're watching this on YouTube, what your thoughts are, if there's any questions, or send me a message on my Instagram at Stephanie Grunke, Stephanie with PH and Grunke with OE. You can already obviously see it in the podcast name as well. I always love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this episode, please give me a 5-star rating or leave a thumbs up on YouTube. So that even more people can benefit from this type of healing that I think is essential to really building a great business world and enabling people to have a fulfilled and successful career. And thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.